One announcement that he did make that I should mention, even though it's wonky, but it might have a real impact on your life, is that they announced this ability to beef up these investigations into the ocean shipping cartel. So there are these three companies, three alliances that are made up of a bunch of different companies, but they're cartels. There are three alliances of ocean shipping that control about 80% of all cargo, 95% of the east-west trading between Asia and the U.S., and their profits are ridiculous. In 2021, they made $190 billion. In all of 2010 to 2020, these alliances made 1/5 of that. In 10 years, they made 1/5 of that. They made $190 billion in 2020. And that affects the cost of every good that's transported anywhere.
Let's just be clear on what $190 billion is equivalent to. It is larger than the annual spending that was proposed in the $1.75 trillion bill that that the government, that was the last iteration of Build Back Better, called for $175 billion worth of spending annually. And these guys made $190 billion. Okay. And
so
where are these American companies? I mean, where
they're all foreign companies. They are all foreign-owned companies. These shipping companies, Maersk and CNH and all these companies. There are credible studies from the Kansas City Federal Reserve and a couple other places, European Central Bank, that say that this year increased shipping prices, because they've just raised their rates tenfold, increased shipping prices will affect 1% of global inflation. So we're at 7% right now. Normal inflation is about 2%. So they're saying 20% of the increase in inflation is just from ocean freight prices. That's just one component of the supply chain that is responsible for all of that. And exporters in this country say that these prices are extortionate. They are frequently, because it makes more sense for these companies to return empties to China, pick up stuff and bring them back, rather than take the time to get exports from the United States, particularly agricultural exports, onto containers and take them away. So they're stranding all these ag exports at the docks. There's a bill in Congress that I think is going to pass that cracks down on some of this stuff. But what Biden announced is that there's this new agreement between the Department of Justice and the Federal Maritime Commission, which is the main regulator of the ocean shipping companies, and it has 119 people that work there. Like, it's this tiny company. Their annual budget, remember we said $190 billion just last year that the shipping companies made? The annual budget of the Federal Maritime Commission is $30 million. Right? So they have no ability to engage. They have authority to engage in investigations to look into anti-competitive conduct by the alliances, but they have no ability to do so. They have no resources. So what this agreement that Biden announced yesterday is that the Department of Justice will essentially be the lawyer of the Federal Maritime Commission, and they will provide all the resources needed to stand up these investigations and essentially use injunctions in federal court to break these contracts that are extortionate and that raise the cost of global shipping.
Is there a number on what that constitutes in terms of services in kind? I mean, from the Justice Department.
I don't know. That's not really calculable.
Okay.
That's not really calculable. But what we know is that this is coming from the Antitrust Division, right? Okay. So this is Jonathan Cantor's group, and they've been very aggressive in other areas in taking on large monopoly-like corporations, and so they are well positioned to deal with the global shipping cartel. And so they will, be involved in running these investigations. And just, it's been so long since any of these investigations have actually happened. They're known as a 6G investigation. That's because of the section of the Shipping Act that authorizes it. there hasn't been one just in decades. And so just even having one might lead to voluntary changes and reforms by the shipping companies who know, like, oh, well, they might crack down on this now, so maybe we should cool it a little bit.
Right, and it's not like they've had a need for attorneys who are boned up on this stuff, because it's not, there's no. All right, so what about the question of the size of these? That because we have allowed for the concentration of these shipping company, and for them, it makes more sense to get these massive ships. Because
it's cheaper for them to transport a good if they're doing it. It's economies of scale, right? If you're transporting them on big ships. I mean, these ships are as big as the Empire State Building.
Right. But that means, and just so the people understand, that all of a sudden means that there's only a couple of ports they can go into in this country because there's
bottlenecks on this end. Yes.
How do we?
The port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which is the only port on the West Coast that can really deal with these ships. And so 40% of all seaborne imports come through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And that's why we've had dozens of ships waiting offshore for a berth to actually get into the docks.
So what do we do? What can we do to deal with that problem? It seems to me one of two things. One is we build more massive ports. And we should say there's also downstream issues from this, right? I mean, with climate change and like transport, like you can build, like you need all the tractor trailers to go into this one place, as opposed to like maybe there's some up in Oregon, maybe there's some down in Southern California, that type of thing. And so. Yeah, I mean, what do we do? What do we do as a country if we want to lessen the implications of putting all our eggs in one ship, as it were?
Well, there are many, right? So we outlined this. We did a whole series on this. Prospect.org/supply chain. You can look at our entire special issue that we devoted just to this. There are several things you can do. One is investment. The bipartisan infrastructure law has $18 billion for ports, and you can use those to expand them, to find more room at the port some of it is just like you don't have room for these containers to offload them, right? So like just building more room would help. Some of it is dredging ports and giving more options. But the other one that you alluded to is building things in this country so that the ports aren't as stressed because some of the output is being done domestically. So Biden mentioned that in his speech as well. He had the CEO of Intel up there who built or committed to building a $20 billion facility in Ohio to make semiconductors, for example. So all of those things are good, but the dilemma of the Biden administration is that these things are necessary, and there's more. There's regulation. There's building reserve capacity, more warehouse space in this country, so that if you do have a problem, you have some reserve inventory to deal with. All of these things take time. I mean, that Intel facility isn't going to be up and running until 2025. It takes time to dredge a port. It takes time to add container space, a pop-up yard or whatever you need. But the Biden administration has a sense of urgency, right? I mean, they need to get down inflation now. And the Ukraine situation hasn't helped this. In fact, it's hurt it a lot. We see oil prices now at $113 a barrel. They were under 100 just a week ago. So this is the dilemma. There are some short-term things like these investigations into global shipping profits that might help in the short term, might not. It remains to be seen. But the real problem is that the ultimate solution here is to fundamentally rethink our logistics system and our system of commerce. But that is not a short-term scenario.